like one of the things I loved about Plex was that I could start it in one place, pick it up in another place, and it would pick up where I was last listening. So I do have a different podcast thingy that I generally use more often, but this could work for that too.
You don't use Google Podcasts?
I don't.
It's dead. It's dead. That's why you don't use it.
It is dead.
They killed it.
They did.
Again.
So,
I think they killed it once.
I use Podverse.
They killed something.
Podverse FM.
Okay.
Podverse.fm.
You don't use AntennaPod, the most open sourcey of the open source podcast things. It even has Discovery in it, Dan.
It does.
How dare you?
I know. So Podverse is one of the podcast 2.0 thingies, but I don't use any of the 2.0 stuffy. I don't use that. Other than...
Whatever. You're sitting on a pile of Bitcoin, aren't you, buddy? Coming up in this episode, does it pass keys, though? So, what happened to Xz anyway? And how do we fix the internet? Welcome to Linux User Space. I'm Leo.
And I'm Dan.
Dan.
Yes.
Dan. In our last live stream,
yep.
You dropped some self-hosting bombs on me that I did not know.
I didn't realize that I'd been holding out, and I've been hosting a couple of things that apparently you didn't know about.
Yeah, well, okay. Full disclosure, this is the second time that I know of. Please tell me if I've done it more. That I have totally whiffed on what Dan said. I vaguely remember Dan saying the word Immich before.
Yes. Yeah, and probably with my terrible Northern New York dialect, you had no idea what I was really saying.
Well, because it happened before with Joplin. So I've been going through this existential crisis of note-taking apps because I care what my markdown looks like.
Yeah.
But Dan was like, Joplin.
Right. Try it.
Yeah, right. And for some reason, I was rubber and he was glue. And, anything he said bounced off me.
Just a bounce. Yeah, bounce.
Yeah. So, I kept ignoring the word Joplin until recently. And it looks quite delightful.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I'm trying to say is I'm sorry, Dan.
Oh, you're good. You're totally good. That's fine. Hey, some of the stuff I do, it makes work, so I can understand the hesitation to jump right in. But it's not a lot of work. It's not bad.
But I'm into it though. The Joplin thing, I'm totally into that. And into the self-hosting thing, I've got a little Git repository hanging out up here. I got a Nextcloud back here. I got Plex going on, man. Like, I'm no stranger to I've got a Raspberry Pi that needs something to do. So, yeah.
I got two things.
That one's on me. So, Immich though.
Immich. Now that
I know we brought it up before, but remind me, what is Immich and why do I want it?
So that's my ability to break free of, well, in my case, Google Photos. But if you had an iPhone, it would be...
I'm already sold. Getting Google out of your life?
Yeah. It'd be the same thing with Apple too, right? You could get that out of there. And so it's the way that I can sync my photos and videos, as long as they aren't too big. Well, I could still sync those, but...
The limitation is your pocketbook for how big your hard drives
how much you want to store, and where do you want to store it, too. You don't necessarily need those, like, always accessible, I suppose, but I definitely want my photos there so that I can look at them on my computer, on my phone, maybe share some, all of that stuff. And so Immich is like Google Photos replacement, really. It's a good one too. It will do image detection, if you will, and it does.
I'm sorry, the Immich detection.
No, like so facial recognition. It kind of has some of that stuff built in, and
oh,
so
really? Wait a minute, hold on. It's got AI.
No, I think it's just like not really, but sort of. But it's locally hosted, right? So
that's what an AI bot would say.
Like we totally talked about how if we could host our own stuff and it was AI, that we'd be kind of okay with that as long as it's doing
I'm
things.
on board, but I'm a cyborg, so that totally.
So, but it does. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty good, honestly. So you can go through and identify different people, and then it'll say, okay, everybody, all of the pictures of so-and-so, I can click on that and it'll have a running list of everybody's pictures, or pretty close. It picks them out pretty good.
Yeah, I know it's a curse word on the show, but on iCloud, I can do the same thing, and it's actually really beneficial.
Google's been doing that for a long time, right?
Yeah. Well, but also Google's uploading it all.
It's gross.
Yeah, right.
So this is built in, self-hosted, and it does take a little bit of CPU, to make it happen right after you sync, because it goes through and does some churn to figure that out, right?
Okay.
The other cool thing that Google Photos has is like a history thing. So you can say, on this day, you took these pictures, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to say, oh, that happened a year ago, or 4 years ago, or 12 years ago, that kind of thing.
Dude, I don't think it's a recent thing, but I have this thing where I'm like, oh man, yeah, that happened a couple months ago. And then like my wife or somebody else will correct me, and they're like, dude, that happened in 2014. What?
Yeah.
So is that just getting older, or do I have a problem?
No, that's probably just getting older, and then time flies, and you go through a lot of things, and you just lose track.
True.
Yeah.
The cool thing is though that that there'll be some tagging involved on your images that will kind of help ground me at least, and remind me that no, it was 10 years ago, not 2 months ago. A bit of time happened in between, and so yeah. Huh. Okay.
Yeah, so
that's really cool.
Running down the whole thing is a timeline of years. So if you knew that you wanted to go back to 2015, you just scroll it back to 2015, and there you are. There's all your pictures, and they're sorted by date, and it's a very nicely organized system for your photos, and it syncs. There's an app you install, and you can pick which folders on your phone that you want to sync. And it just syncs those automatically. You don't even have to think about it. And you can pick whether you want to do that on Wi-Fi, or if you want to do it on the mobile network, you can do that. Like, all of those things are configurable.
I bought the unlimited plan, so I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
I pay way too much for it.
Yep.
I need to get some use out of it.
And that's totally fine. But, I mean, based on your needs, you can tailor it any way you want, right?
That's really cool.
It can wait until you've got your phone plugged in and you're on your Wi-Fi network, and it'll say, okay, yep, you're plugged in.
Yeah.
It's time to
plugged
sync.
in, that's useful. But the data thing, nope.
Yep. So then looking at it obviously is nicer on your computer to be able to look at your photos, right? Because you have a bigger screen to look at.
That is super cool.
And then you can take it and share it with other people. So that's pretty great.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just photos. It's photo syncing. It does take a little bit to keep up with. You kind of got to watch the changelog a little bit sometimes, because they'll do some changes.
Oh, I don't got to worry about that. My Docker containers get updated maybe like once a month. I'm probably giving myself way too much credit on that. So what you're saying is every couple of months, look at the changelog and do it regardless of what the changelog says, because that's exactly how I run everything. There's
a lot of updates.
Okay, so I'll be skipping like 20 at a time. That's great.
You might be able to, but you're going to have to read through all of those changelogs, right? Just to kind of watch the changes. It's not bad.
You say that, but as long as I hold the old container and don't destroy it, I just roll back.
That's
the beauty
true.
of containers.
They're very good about the documentation on what you need to change in your Docker Compose or whatnot.
Yeah. I refuse to like write a Linux distribution on the bleeding edge, but as far as like updating service containers in the background on Raspberry Pis or whatever random machine I'm running services on, I do kind of do that.
I'm bad.
Thinking about that now, that's kind of dangerous. Okay.
I run Watchtower and I tagged latest.
Well, right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Because like I do that too, because I just never went into the Docker Compose and changed that. So
yeah.
Huh.
So
okay.
But I'm using Watchtower, which automatically updates that stuff for me.
Yeah. Okay.
So living on the ragged edge, I'm there. And so that's how I know that sometimes there's breaking changes, because I've had a couple of times where I had to go in and say, okay, what changed?
Yeah.
It's usually not too bad. Just go in there, make a couple of tweaks, and then boom, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, yeah. And then I get like when I upgrade like Fresh RSS or something like that, I get really nervous when it takes an extra few seconds to start up or whatever. It's on a Pi 4. I'm like, it should be fast. But it takes an extra 24 seconds and I'm like, oh God, I broke it.
Crunching some database thing in the background.
Yeah, it's doing something. Yeah. Exactly. So so I have one question.
Yeah.
This may be more on the AI naughty side, but one thing that I have found useful in iCloud, in iPhoto or whatever the Apple thing is, I can live without it, but super useful. I took a picture of a bug one day, and it was crawling along my floor. I was like, "What the heck kind of bug is it? It doesn't look dangerous, but I'll take a picture of it just so I can show my wife, or I can whatever." And then when I was going to share it, there was the little info button down there had sparkles on it. I was like, oh, I've never seen that before. What is that about? Click on it. It's like, hey.
Enhance your photo, yeah.
Nope.
No?
This was like, hey, did you know this is a cucumber beetle?
Really?
Yes. And so I run around and I start taking pictures of flowers and bugs and stuff. And one of the features of the photo app is that it will straight up tell you, within reason, I'm sure it's not super specific, but if it's easily identifiable, it'll straight up tell you, this is this kind of mushroom, this is this kind of flower, this is this kind of bug. So do you happen to know if Immich has anything like that built in?
I don't think so, right?
Okay.
It would have to know about that, and it'd have to be something that was locally, inside of the
I'll make
app
my Pi
or
sweat.
database.
That's okay.
But I don't think so. The only thing I know of that it does is it does some transcoding, right? So you can have different size images, right? And it does the facial recognition. Those are the two things that I know of that it really kind of churns on. It does some reverse geocoding as well.
I'm not a fan of that.
Well, it takes it from the metadata that's on your photo.
Right.
So you're already uploading that anyway. So
well, I specifically turned that off.
And that's fine. Like I do too. And so it struggles on those, right? But if you wanted to use that feature, you could, and it doesn't really leave your computer, your self-hosted spot.
Oh, right. That's the saving grace to all of that.
Right.
Which would even encourage me to turn it back on, because maybe I forgot where I was when I took that photo or whatever, and this would help me figure out, retrace my steps. Because as we've established, I have a bad memory. So, that'd be really cool. So maybe one day Immich will have something like that. If it requires downloading some kind of weird AI model to do that I'm all for it. This is the kind of stuff that I think AI is super useful for.
So they actually call it machine learning, not AI, but I'm just saying. It is a bit like the hardware accelerated machine learning stuff is experimental.
Do I have to go buy an NVIDIA card now?
You don't have to, but if you wanted to.
But I could.
Yeah, if you had some CUDA cores that you could devote to this, it would be a lot faster, obviously.
I have avoided buying NVIDIA for
but
a
it
long
works
time.
fine without it because I don't have that. And it does do some of those things for you.
It probably just takes a little longer to churn through and figure it out or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you had 800,000 1,000 CUDA cores to throw at it, it would probably be pretty quick. Okay.
Yeah, which would be neat, right?
That's pretty cool, yeah.
I don't, but the fact that it does some of those things out of the box without a whole lot of configuration is really cool.
I was already sold before the bug identification, but
yeah, I don't have that, but that's pretty cool.
I feel like that would be a pretty cool feature to add to Immich, so
yeah, maybe someday.
We'll see how that goes. If I need to download 8 gigs of a model, I'm down. Let's go.
Yep.
But there was one other thing that this is the one that blew my mind. I don't know why, but you and I a couple of years ago were real sad.
Yeah,
because we both got an email, I think, within a day of each other.
Yeah.
And Plex dropped a bomb on us that was like, hey, guess what? Your podcast's gone.
No more podcasts.
Yeah, both of us used it
a lot. I used it a lot.
Yeah, multi-platform. It kept your status. It you can add anything you wanted to. There was a discover feature. Like it was a full-featured podcasting, like following app thing. And Plex was just like, you know what? I'm not making us any money, so
goodbye.
It's gone. Yeah, later. That was sad. But you've kind of found a bit of a solution for that. But more than that, that's not even what it's for. It's good at that too.
Yeah. So this is Audiobookshelf, which is really an audiobook
shelf.
Yeah, I mean, it's a place that you put all your audiobooks in.
It is exactly what it says it is.
It plays them back, and you can sort your library and all of that stuff, and that's kind of nice, and it can pull those down. But the other thing it can do that is kind of neat is it can pull in your podcasts. So if you have you have an RSS feed, you can drop them in there, and it'll automatically pull those in for you and sync that up.
You can get linuxuserspace.show's RSS feed at linuxuserspace.show. So just in case you haven't put that in there, I feel like if you're listening to the show right now, you have. But if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't put us on your phone, maybe go do that. So, yeah,
it'll do that. It'll pull them in. It'll save them locally so that if something happens, you've got them on your self-hosted solution. But the thing that really I love. And so I do use a different podcast app for the most part, but the thing that I love that Audiobookshelf does, and it does it for free, is if I'm playing something on my computer, I can then pick up my phone and I can pick up where I left off from my computer, and then I can go
Audible
to my
style.
Yeah, I can go to my work computer, and then I can pick up where I left off from my phone and all of that. So that's a nice thing. I can have multiple devices and still keep my place throughout the history of what I've been listening to.
Yeah. So Plex can do that.
Yep.
They got rid of the podcast thing, but I don't even know that they actually fully ever supported audiobooks. They just have a couple of options that you can add to an audio library that kind of facilitates a better audiobook experience, but it's fine. But if there is a better solution, I'm on board. So Audiobookshelf seems to me to be that solution. Now, again, that curse word comes up again. I'm on an Apple device, and it looks like the iOS apps are in beta only, and there's apparently an Apple defined hard limit to how many beta users you can have, and that's 10,000. And apparently there are already 10,000 beta testers for this, which tells me that it's a good app.
It's time to go. It's time to go live. That's what it tells me.
So do good work, beta testers. I'm counting on you. Yeah. And when it comes out in a more stable channel, when it comes out on the App Store, I'm there. I'm ready. That way, I can put all of these, it's got to be 100 by now, audiobooks that I've gotten from Humble Bundle. Because, there's no other real easy way to listen to your audiobooks and consistent way to listen to your audiobooks on the go than to have some kind of solution like this. So right now, they're just kind of hodgepodged in Plex, but I'd like a better solution for it, and this looks like it.
Yeah, no, that is where this application really shines, is the audiobooks, and especially if you've got some DRM free stuff that you've purchased, that you own, you can put them in here, and then you can get all of that in there in your own. Yeah, and then you can listen to it anywhere, which is nice. It'll pull down the cover art, if you will,
really?
for the books.
So it's got all that too.
Yeah, it's got all that stuff in there that you can link it up to. If that book exists on, Audible or whatever, it'll pull in the cover art and stuff from there so that it looks nice and whatnot.
Yeah, Plex is very hit or miss on that. Sometimes you won't even get lucky and it won't even pull down the right author. It's the experience is clunky at best and just downright terrible sometimes. So this, I'm telling you, this, I'm excited to run a few more containers on these empty Raspberry Pis because as we found out on the last live stream, I have an entire Pi that I thought I was doing something with and I'm not. So yeah, this might be, I wonder how good the Immich face detection stuff will work on a low-powered ARM processor. I think that's going to be something that I'll have to come back and kind of report on.
I don't know about that one, but maybe it might be all right.
Right. It's going to be touch and go, but maybe it's good enough. I have a Pi 4 that I could kind of shuffle some things around, maybe run it over there.
Pretty well, honestly.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I'm pushing a Pi 2 right now to its limit using SyncThing. Like the bottleneck there is the CPU power and the USB bus to be able to actually, I can't even get the full 10 megabits or megabytes per second that I should be getting because, it's all in the Ethernet and the USB and everything else is on the same bus. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm running this in Docker on a VM that sits in my Proxmox, cluster.
Yeah.
And I don't have a whole lot of stuff devoted to it as far as resources.
Audiobookshelf, I don't imagine would take a whole lot. The Immich face detection stuff, that's where the real CPU kind of is going to come in and knock something over.
I mean, it's running a bunch of Docker things, and I've only given it one CPU and 4 gig of RAM, so
okay,
it's not super hefty.
Got it. All right, so I've got two last questions for you.
Yep.
Photo stuff. That's great. You take pictures, usually not within your house. Sometimes you do, but usually it's out of people outside.
That's true.
Doing stuff, right? And audiobooks, I mean, locally that's fine, but when you're on your phone, when you're out and about, how do you actually get access to these things when you're not home?
So I have two solutions for that. And each one of those has a different one just because I was mostly testing them out. No rhyme or reason to why I have two different ones.
Okay.
So one thing
just
I do
because you're a nerd. That's my favorite thing.
That's it. I got to try this stuff out. So
why not?
One thing I do for Immich is I actually use a Cloudflare tunnel to get to that. So basically Cloudflare acts like a proxy at that point. And it proxies all of your requests down to your thing.
And so that's like when you go to some websites, there Cloudflare pops up and it's like, we're making sure you're not a malicious guy.
Yeah.
And then after a couple seconds, it lets you through or whatever.
Sometimes.
This is the same kind of thing, but in front of your own services on your own network.
Yep.
Right. Where normally you would just be like an exposed port to the internet.
Yeah,
you've asked Cloudflare to sit right in front and say, be the bouncer. Make sure everything's cool.
That is an encrypted tunnel, so I don't have to open up a port for that. So my container reaches out to Cloudflare. It says, hey, I'm here. And then they talk to each other. So I don't have any open ports there. So that it's like a VPN kind of in between, right?
Yeah, it's kind of how TeamViewer exposes your machine out to the internet, but not quite, not really.
Right.
You have to have specific information to be able to connect to it. Yep. So there's a central server keys. Out there.
You put some keys in and it connects, and then Cloudflare can pass the stuff back to you, and that's great.
Cool.
And so you can set up ACLs, so you can have geo IP type restrictions if you wanted to, and then ultimately if it detects some nefarious thing through whatever web application stuff it
Anybody
does.
from Australia, basically.
Yeah, well, maybe, but if it detected some kind of brute force stuff going on, it will throw up a CAPTCHA, and so you'll have to go through the CAPTCHA stuff to get past that. So it's just a couple layers on the onion there, if you will, right?
Got it. Okay. So what's the other way besides doing a little Cloudflare finagle?
The other thing I use is Tailscale, and so I drop some Tailscale. I have a few Tailscale things configured, and so then I can turn Tailscale on my phone, and then I have access to all those, or I have Tailscale on my laptop, so then I can get back into some of my stuff on the local network that way. Tailscale has a broker, if you will, and that is what manages all of your connections so that things can find each other, more or less.
Yeah, so this is standing on top of the VPN technology WireGuard.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, so they are direct connections to each other at that point.
Right.
They don't go through Tailscale, only for the brokering of the connection.
Right. So you meet in the middle at a Tailscale node, but Tailscale has no idea really what's going on. They just have an idea of where the endpoints
are. Yeah, it's like
maybe?
SyncThing, kind of like the way SyncThing works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. All right. So this is VPN, but better. Now, that means, though, that you have to log into Tailscale's website and kind of set these things up, right?
You do, to configure them all and get that all set up. You do need access to the Tailscale website to basically authorize your machines.
Okay. Well, speaking of authorization, I have a real question for you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Passwords are bad. We know this.
Yeah.
TOTP, those one-time password things, make it a little better, but it's all still bad.
They're not great either.
Does Tailscale support the newest, latest, greatest, best password killer thing called Passkeys?
Not directly. Okay.
Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. Is there hope?
Yeah. So they use different identity providers, and you could, in theory, set up a custom one. There's some options there. Go read that. I'm not going to explain that here. But out of the box, without doing anything, Google, Apple, GitHub, Microsoft, those are all supported identity providers.
Okay. So I have to use something from the big three, really. Yeah. Because GitHub is Microsoft. GitHub is just another version of Microsoft.
It's another, Microsoft identity provider, yeah. But since all of those support passkeys, technically you could.
Okay. All right. So I can use passkeys kind of in a one step away kind of situation. All right. Is Tailscale good enough that and I think this is more of a question for people that use Tailscale in general. I think Dan's going to tell me yes because Dan already uses Tailscale. But how do you log into Tailscale? Do you use your Google account? Is it an Apple thing? Do you Microsoft what Windows hello? You let it look at your face and it's like, hey, guess what? You're into Tailscale. I mean, that's really cool. But I'm on this kick, man. Passwords are bad. One-time passwords are slightly better. I mean, there are a few other okay solutions, but nothing that actually gets supported widely, that's going to really be adopted by absolutely everybody. And it looks like Passkeys, which is a kind of an iteration on the thing that we do with SSH, the SSH keys, the openness. You generate a couple, you generate a public one and a private one. You put the public one all over the place and use the private one to authenticate. This is what Passkeys really is, but in a very digestible, human understandable, because you don't have to get that deep to really get it, way to do authentication. And this is kind of where I'm at. Like, if it'll do a passkey, I feel really good about it. So, is it worth me diving into it before they get passkey support? Or should I just use passkeys with one of those things? Or what's the deal? Long story short, I want to dive into passkeys because I think everybody should be using them and abandoning passwords altogether. And if I can do that, then the more people using it, the faster we're going to get support on every website ever, so that I don't ever have to think about copy pasting a password ever again. Like, I try to break things. I set it up to 128 character passwords just to see if I can break it. Some stuff works, some stuff doesn't.
Sometimes you can. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So passkeys, though, I won't even get the chance to break things because it just works. It feels like it shouldn't work. It feels like it's wrong for how little I have to do to log into something with a passkey.
Yeah. Like, security is not supposed to be convenient. But this breaks the mold. Somehow.
Stay tuned. I want to talk about more about passkeys, but I need you to tell me if it's worth diving into Tailscale before they support that.
I'll just say they've added a bunch of identity providers since they initially started. They only had Google when they first started, so the fact that they have more now is encouraging.
Yeah. I can't just type in a generic username and a password 123.
No, because I don't think they don't keep track of your username and password. They don't care.
That's true. They let somebody else do it. All right, so I'll just use Microsoft, create a dummy account with a terrible username and a bad password, and I'll be good to go.
Yeah, I think exactly.
Okay. So if you haven't found us out on YouTube yet, audio only? Well, we're on YouTube too. You can see our faces.
Yee.
I don't know if you want to do that. But if you do want to do that, sometimes there are things that we say that don't really fully get across until you see what the eyebrows are doing at the time. So it kind of makes it. Makes it. So if you haven't checked us out on YouTube, make sure you go do that. We have the full show episodes. We have something that actually doesn't come out on the podcast stream. That is the live streams that we mentioned in the last segment. So that's something exclusive to YouTube, I think. But we're also on Twitch, obviously. If you want to go watch that live, all those live streams happen on Twitch. They stay there for a couple days, but they get archived over on YouTube. So you can check those out one way or the other. The history stuff, the deep dive learning stuff that we have that we're about to get into. If you're watching this on YouTube day one, it'll be a couple days. Then we'll push that out by itself as a single. But that can all be found on Tilvids when we release those by themselves. So that's like the Debian history, the Slackware history, I don't know, what other kind of histories did we did? The Vim history, Emacs history, all kinds of things.
The text editors, the whole series. Yeah, that was good.
We got distracted from distros and then did text editors for a little while, but we're doing the exact same thing right here, and we got distracted from distros again to talk about compression algorithms.
Yeah.
The history of math.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That'll show up on Tilvids here pretty soon. And then, of course, if you like the work that we do, if you enjoy these history deep dives, if you like our terribly, terribly bad takes on all things internet, you can always support us over on Patreon. Encourages us to do more deep dives, encourages us to be, more and more wild and weird and I don't know. And the more you do it, the faster we get those T-shirts out there, I guess, right?
We need to work on that, Leo.
It's just a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and there are a couple. There's a couple easy ways to do it, but it's still a lot of work. So
It's time.
If we know you care about the swaggy stuff. There are a couple of folks that we have on the slate that we're just going to send stuff to. But if you're a fan of the swag, you got to let us know. And then, I might encourage us to go ahead and get that all set up. So, yeah. Anyway, patreon.com/Linux Userspace. Look us up on Tilvids. We're Linux Userspace. And of course on YouTube, youtube.com/Linux Userspace. Find us. We're out there. Go watch. All right, this is the history of Xz, but Before we jump into this, we need to get a couple things explained. For those of you in the back, you didn't study for the pop quiz. Here are a couple of terms that you got to know.
An algorithm is just a step-by-step, usually math-type process. Compression is a computing technique that squashes files down to save space using math. A software development kit is a group of tools used to create a piece of software.
Now, let's talk Xz. You may have heard of it. Prior to one of the highest profile Linux issues, since it was, and still is, used in quite a few places, including Debian, Fedora, and of course the Linux kernel itself. If you had heard of it, you may have also heard of its predecessor, LZMA. These are both file formats, but more importantly, LZMA is also the compression algorithm that underpins both. Hold on tight with me while we get the timeline right. Back in the late 1990s, Igor Pavlov came up with a new novel compression algorithm, LZMA. That is the Lempel-Ziv Markov chain algorithm. It leans on the work of Andrey Markov, a Russian mathematician from the early 1900s, whose work can be found threaded through statistics in almost all walks of life, and Abraham Lempel and Jacob Ziv, whose work on LZ77 and LZ78, two compression algorithms published in 1977 and 78 respectively, inspired all sorts of newer compression techniques like GIF in 1987, ZIP in 1989, and Ping in 1996, and yes, LZMA around the same time. Still with me? Great. Now that LZMA was very much a thing, a way for people to actually squash files down in size without having to be overly technical, arrived on January 2nd, 1999 in the form of the first 7-zip beta, version 2.00, running on Windows. Its first official release would be July 18th in the same year. Over the next few years, both LZMA and 7-zip would see plenty of improvement, but adoption would be slower. But one big milestone in mid-2005 would see adoption fostered. LZMA, which was sequestered away within 7-zip itself, was finally decoupled and made available as the LZMA SDK, or Software Development Kit, and licensed under the GNU LGPL and IBM's CPL. Enter Colin Lassa and a core team of developers working on a new Linux distribution based on Slackware named Slackles around the same time as the LZMA SDK release. Confusion with the newer like-named distributions won't really be an issue since the Slackles name was quickly replaced with Tukanni, the Finnish word for toucan, to create the Tukanni Linux Project. Its goal was to be a slim Linux distribution that could fit on one CD-ROM, that's less than 700 megabytes, and create tooling to benefit all users of Linux, but most especially Slackware, and most interestingly, to a package management system for Slackware named Package Tools, or PKG Tools. Now, if you weren't aware, package management systems like Debian's dpackage and Red Hat's RPM use compression to squash files for easy transport, and the Tukanni Linux Project's PKG Tools was no different. For compression, it used, you guessed it, LZMA in the form of the GCC-compiled LZMA SDK. Further still, the awfully complex command line utilities that were innate to LZMA were refined and simplified by the project, starting with LZMA.sh, later called LZMash. This effort eventually translated into what we know as LZMA Utils, or utilities. However, in 2006, Colin would take a break from both Tukanni and LZMA Utils as a result of recurring health issues. Unfortunately, in mid-2007, the Tukanni Linux Project was officially gone. But LZMA Utils and the new LZMA file format would live on. And a couple months later, LZMA Utils was released to everyone as an alpha, and a forum was set up to facilitate development. A little over a year's worth of development, stalling, and improvements, LZMA Utils was left behind in favor of the similarly LZMA-backed Xz Utils. Xz still bases itself on the LZMA SDK. Aside from the command you run, which is Xz, the thing that does the real heavy lifting is called liblzma. Now, remembering that library's name will come in handy later. And on January 14th, 2009, version 1.0.0 of the Xz file format specification was announced. The Xz Utils package branched off the old LZMA versioning of 4 and began with 4.999.7 as a beta that would soon roll over to version 5 at the end of 2010. It did so with almost universal support for Windows, Mac, and Unix-like operating systems, including the BSDs and Linuxes, and even DOS. Adoption was increasing, and even Arch was no holdout, since the file size reduction Xz achieved was too much to ignore. They began using Xz for their own packages in the same year. Over the following years, the Xz utilities were incrementally updated, but the file format lay dormant, and mostly quietly, Fedora, Slackware, and Debian would also follow in Arch's footsteps and use Xz to compress software packages too. As the years went on, some distributions would eventually migrate to using Z standard compression, including Arch in 2019. Fedora and Ubuntu would make the switch in 2020, and in some cases, higher compression could be achieved, but most importantly, decompression times were vastly improved. It's important to note that Colin worked on Xz and his other projects as time allowed, but between life and health, there were lengths of time where seemingly nothing was done. But taking these breaks as he did will have always been the right choice. It was around this time of Xz to Z standard compression switching in Linux distribution packaging, right about 2021, that a new name appeared on GitHub, Gia T75, otherwise known as GiaTan. While his first patches weren't to Xz but to libarchive, in hindsight, they were fishy. The change in this case was to use an unsafe variant of fprint. This was a tool that simply outputs things with lots of available options. More patches over the following months continued from Gia to other projects, but none to Xz until mid-April of 2022. Colin wasn't merging it. A new face, though, Jigar Kumar, shows up to apply a little pressure to get this patch accepted on Gia's behalf.
Over 1 month, and no closer to being merged. Not a surprise.
But over the following weeks, and with pressure from other transient users like Dennis Enns, GiaTan was noted to have been supplying Colin with patches outside of the usual methods. Colin said,
I haven't lost interest, but my ability to care has been fairly limited, mostly due to long-term mental health issues, but also due to some other things. Recently, I've worked off list a bit with GiaTan on Xz Utils, and perhaps he will have a bigger role in the future. We'll see. It's also good to keep in mind that this is an unpaid hobby project. Anyway, I assure you that I know far too well about the problem that not much progress has been made. The thought of finding new maintainers has existed for a long time, too, as the current situation is obviously bad and sad for the project.
After about 8 months of prodding and patching behind the scenes on January 7th, 2023, GiaTan was finally able to merge their own commits to Xz on GitHub. All that's left now is to put the forthcoming pieces into place. In March, Contact information for Colin is replaced with Gia's on Google's OSS Fuzz utility so that any bugs, errors, or security concerns that might come of throwing random stuff at Xz would be routed to Gia, not Colin. In June, an update to liblzma that was supplied by another transient user, Hans Jansen, was accepted by Gia Tan on Colin's behalf, laying more foundation for what was to come. All that was left was to convince the OSS Fuzz team to accept a patch that disabled indirect function, which would, according to Gia, cause issues with testing. Gia also made a stop at the LLVM repository, a compiler and debugger to note that the issues that might show up during compilation of Xz could safely be ignored. Finally, in February of 2024, Gia directed the OSS Fuzz project to his own domain at xz.tukanni.org, rather than the original tukanni.org/xz, giving Gia even more control to push out the final step later in the month, which would be adding the test files, which weren't test files at all. These would eventually be included in 5.6.0 and 5.6.1 of Xz Utils. The plan was set, and only the final push for inclusion in projects was left for Gia to do. Throughout March, Gia and other transient accounts starting on March 25th would spread out and request the newly minted but tainted Xz tarballs be included in Debian, Fedora, and Ubuntu, as well as Go libraries associated with 1Password. Projects like Debian and Fedora did indeed accept those commits into SID and Rawhide respectively, but on March 29th, Andres Freund took to OpenWall, a software and security site, and Mastodon to explain what he found the day before when looking into some benchmarks he was working on when he noticed slowdowns in SSH, or Secure Shell, a remote control protocol used by Linux boxes everywhere.
I accidentally found a security issue while benchmarking Postgres changes. If you run Debian testing, unstable, or some other more bleeding edge distribution, I strongly recommend upgrading ASAP. I was doing some micro benchmarking at the time, saw SSHD processes were using a surprising amount of CPU, got suspicious. Recalled that I had seen an odd Valgrind complaint in automated testing of Postgres a few weeks earlier, after package updates. Really required a lot of coincidences.
As far as normal users are concerned, the end result of this situation was that a SSH key for systems running XZ, SSH, and systemd was extracted and placed and allowed anybody with the private key to log in. Over the next 24 hours, Fedora and Debian shut things down and reverted the changes, saving almost everyone from one of the biggest bamboozles in the history of Linux and open source software. On April 2nd, Colin adds a page to his tukanni.org domain to acknowledge the incident and keep a running log of what had gone down. So catch these and other great topics as they unfold on our Lemmy subreddit or our news channel on Discord. That's linuxuserspace.show/Lemmy, Reddit, Discord, Mastodon, Telegram, Matrix, Twitch, Twitter, all the things. And as one astute user found out, if you just put gibberish in there, you still get something.
You do.
So there's nothing Dan hasn't figured out for us.
I mean, you're going to go someplace.
One thing that you can do at the landing page that you end up on is add our RSS to Audiobookshelf.
Yeah, sure.
or whatever podcast catcher you have.
Yep.
But more than that, join the discussion.
Yeah.
Help us decide the direction that the show is going to go. If you like the history stuff, suggest more history stuff. I didn't expect to go down the XZ route, and then all of a sudden, all of the Linuxes were about to explode. And it just sounded kind of cool, and who thought I was going to end up at 1906 talking about Markov chains? Not me.
Nobody. Yeah, nobody. No, not even us. So, but, you know, we do a feedback show. Maybe you've noticed, like every other one. And so send us some stuff and we'll talk about it. Like
That's right.
We totally talk about most of those. Sometimes not right away, but we get it in there.
And sometimes we have an entire show based only on your feedback. That actually happened.
Those are some of our favorites, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our forum on Lemmy, there's a specific community that you can go and just post your thoughts or whatever you're thinking or whatever you think about the show or whatever you want to talk about. I mean, tech related, it's just a nice place to put weird nerd things. Same with a subreddit. But if you're more into conversation that happens in real time, the Discord, the Mastodon, the Telegram, and the Matrix, those are good places to do that.
Absolutely.
And that live stream that we keep talking about, that was really, really good.
That's some pretty real time feedback too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's over on Twitch and it gets posted to YouTube. But yeah, of course, it's a good time. Twitter does exist.
It's a good hangout time. Yeah.
Okay, Dan, we're fresh off talking about where Xz came from, and most especially what happened starting in 2021 that led up to one of the craziest bamboozles in all of open source /Linux/FOSS /Unix /compression history, right? Like,
yeah, it's nuts.
And more even broader than that. Like, this is software that even companies that make proprietary software depend on. This is
they build their stuff on this. Yeah.
Right. So this is internet wide. Dan, how do we fix the internet? Why is open source susceptible to these types of attacks? Is closed source susceptible to this? What can we do to alleviate these problems in the future? Dan, you have all the answers. How safe is it to base your entire software stack on one person's personal project? Okay, all right. I'm sorry. I'll back up.
Whew.
How do we fix the internet? Give me all the answers right now.
Okay. The internet's broken, folks. We can't fix it.
Well, we knew that during it was Heartbleed, right? Was it?
Yeah. That's a bad one.
The one about OpenSSL, and there was the one guy that was kind of propping up the entire.
No. We've been here, done this. Like, this is not the first time.
Right, and then one company was like, "Here, we'll cut you a $40,000 check," and then we never talked about him again, and yet we're still running all of our encryption over the same types of protocols.
Yeah, we thought about changing, and then we changed back, and here we are. Yeah, right. And it's the same kind of thing all over again. We just keep doing this. We keep doing it. Listen, like, so a lot of these maintainers are starting to get fed up. Like, they're saying, it's my project. It's a personal project. I'm not your supplier. Like, don't at me, bro. I mean,
yeah.
Right? This isn't like I put this out there as a hobby thing. It's great that you use it, but if you're really depending on it, maybe there should be some contract, or maybe they should get some compensation. All of those things. Like, maybe that should happen. I think that's part of the issue, right? Is someone is trying to scratch their own itch, and they created something, and it's great, and people are taking a hold of it. And that's fine if we keep it at that range, a lot like we do with this podcast, right? Or, this is our passion project. We take some donations in Patreon, but we don't depend on it to feed our families and
right.
whatnot, right? We offer it up there so you can take it as is. But please don't build your business on the stuff that we do.
Right. Like, it's CC BY, right? Like, you could do that. But if you do that and you build an entire business on top of that, and then, we take a left turn and we're not, maybe we stop the podcast. I'm not suggesting that's what's going to happen. But
yeah, just give it up. Right?
Or we take a year off or something like that, right? And then you come back and start saying, hey, where are the episodes at? We need these now. We're not a patron or anything like that. We just need it. We just need it more now. Hurry. Absolutely not, right? Like, but that kind of begs the question, is open source and people that do stuff like this, ostensibly for free, is that just an innate susceptibility of open source or open culture or open, just open stuff?
I mean, sure, in a way. Hopefully, though, the way a lot of the open source projects work is there's multiple people. There's a team of people, and they've kind of been working together for a while. So they can have some rotation in duties, maybe have some sort of code of conduct so they know how to act. And I guess gracefully walking away from the project can hand it off to someone else for a time. All of those types of things are on your honors, your honor system, essentially. But they're there, and I think a lot of the projects are governed that way, so they are sustainable and can continue. And there's some peer review going on, those types of things. I think that's typically the way projects go that are, long-term projects and sustainable.
Yeah. What do you think open sourcers? I don't even know how to describe them, because open source and FOSS are different things. Free and open source and open source.
True.
They're different things, and there's licenses that kind of fall on one side or the other. But what do you think would be the reaction to, say, if Red Hat was a big user of Xz, and instead of contributing to Xz and kind of depending on the head maintainer approving merges and things like that, they just fork Xz, call it something else, and then take it off in their own direction? Would that be good? I mean, it's certainly in the spirit of FOSS, because that's the entire reason it exists, for you to be able to take the code, study the code, do whatever you want to the code, as long as you
publish it.
Most of the open source licenses require some kind of reciprocation of, as long as you make that stuff available too, and that way maybe it can be merged back into the original project, or additional forks can be made. Do you think that would be something that would be, kosher in the communities that kind of back this type of software?
That's a bit of a coup, I guess, the way you described it, perhaps. But typically the way I would envision something like that going down is because someone wants to go a different direction than the original project, and so they want to make some changes, and maybe attempted to try to get those included into the project, but were unsuccessful.
Exactly the way that Giatan did, I think, because
that's true.
While what Gia was doing, and we're talking Gia as in
a person, we don't know if it's a person or multiple persons or an entity.
And
we don't know what it is. We've got
and I don't have enough facts to really speculate, but
I don't think anybody does.
Feels a little groupy, but
it might be.
That's kind of the idea, right? And then there was pressure from other, let's call them users of the software, people on the mailing list that were transient, because they disappeared. They no longer exist, really.
Nom de plume.
Right, exactly, right?
pen
a pen
names.
Name. Yeah. That's kind of the way, the regular open source way was kind of the way that these changes ended up merged in. They took advantage of someone, Colin, that was not putting his full attention on the project at the time, which is his right to do. It's his project.
Exactly.
But then they added a layer of social engineering to it, to layer on the guilt and layer on the, people are languishing. They're not able to get these cool new features that we're trying to add to the project. And Colin relented and allowed Gia eventually, over about a year, to get his essentially hooks into the project and start merging in his own changes. But isn't that the open source way? Now, I'm not talking about the social engineering part, but I am talking about someone that is a concerned user that has the ability to...
It's what we promote. Yeah.
Add value to the... Yeah, this is exactly what developers that are tired of hearing. Add this feature, add this feature, add this feature, with not a single pull request in sight.
Send in your pull request. Yeah, send your pull requests.
Exactly. Yeah. This is a lot of times. This is what gets asked of the people making those requests. Well, I'm waiting for your code. Send a pull request. We'll take a look at it and maybe we'll merge it. But
yeah. Can you help us implement that feature? Because, we don't have a lot of time. So maybe you can help us, contribute some of that.
Exactly. And this is the kind of thing that was taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So it's just the open source way is susceptible to social engineering attacks in this way.
Timing was good.
Yeah, especially when it comes down to the one-man type project like Xz ended up being. Now, there was a team, and there certainly were more contributors than just Colin throughout the lifetime of Xz, but, at the time of all of this, Colin that was it.
Yep,
that was the hurdle you had to pass.
Yep.
Right.
Well, let's face it, this isn't exciting. It's not an exciting thing to be working on.
Yeah.
There's no bling here. Right?
Yeah, we at the beginning of the history, we had to kind of define compression because not everybody is fully up on terminology like that. We had to define software development kit. We had to define a couple of different things just to make sure that everybody could follow along with the timeline. Because not only is it not particularly interesting unless you're a mathematician, unless you really enjoy things like LZMA or compression algorithms or mathematics in general. It's technical too, so you get into the weeds of things.
Oh yeah,
and so it turns a lot of folks off. So it happens in the shadows. What's going on?
It provides a good function. Don't get me wrong. It backs up a whole bunch of other things that you might be working on. So that may be a reason to be interested in it as well. As it can make your further your project along.
Yeah,
but all by itself, it is not exciting.
Right, exactly, and which explains why there was only one person working on Xz in the first place. But yet it had so much adoption in 2019, 2020, leading up to those years. Almost everybody, all of the big distros
because it
used
worked
it.
well. It worked well.
Exactly, and yet it was still headed up by essentially one person.
One guy.
So it is a problem of open source to deal with these kinds of things, and these. I don't think anybody getting into programming or scratching their own itch or doing anything like this ever expects to be rocketed into popularity because some people decided that your invention essentially is the best one, is the best way to do it, and just like OpenSSL before it.
Yeah, same thing.
It was the best way to encrypt everything on the internet at all times forever, and when you find a flaw in it. Oh no. Yeah. What are we going to do? Pay the guy? Probably not.
That's not the only thing that motivates people though either.
Exactly. And I think the blog post of, I'm not part of the supply chain. Why are you involving me in all of this? I never said that I wanted to be part of your house of cards. To then have all of this pressure on me, in some cases, to have to fix this or to deal with this or to whatever.
I think this goes back to one of your other questions that you had. Does that make closed source better?
I don't think it does because, as we've seen time and time again, closed source is going to reach out to open source and use those types of projects inside their own projects. And as long as they do attribution for most of those licenses, everything's cool.
Right. But it's worse then because you don't see what's going on. But this is a case where even though this was open source, you still couldn't see what was going on. You know why? Because it was a binary thing that was included in a test, of the application, if you will.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't look inside of that. You had to run it in order to know what happened.
Exactly. So you had to have someone that just had the right amount. That's André's point. It had the right amount of interest in what was going on.
Everybody is thanking that got found. I mean, because it was one of those that's just not obvious.
Exactly. So, I mean, he had the time, he had the gumption, he had the willingness to dig down and actually figure it out. I mean, there were traces involved. This is hours and hours and hours of time dealt with to try and track down why is SSH acting weird? And it just led rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole to find out that what's this SSH key doing here? How did it get here?
Right.
And then luckily telling us all about it on OpenWall and Mastodon, and then it exploded over the next 24 hours, and Debian and Fedora caught on their heels. Oh God, revert this.
Yeah, and Ubuntu, like everybody was rebuilding from scratch. Yeah. Everything, every package, start over, rebuild all your packages.
But that's the boon of open source. In a closed source world, you wouldn't have this kind of investigation unless that person is employed at that place on the team to be able to test that thing, to be able to look at it, to be able to ask those questions and not be shut down at any step of the way.
Yeah. And so I want to dive into the timing of things a little more there too, because Ubuntu was just getting ready to release 2404, right? And Fedora also looking to release Fedora 40, and things are frozen up and stuff's happening, and like not a lot of time before these things are happening,
right?
The releases, and so they both, midnight oil was burned to get things back to a good state. And that's a lot of work. It was a lot of work and watching it go by.
And I hope most, if not all, of the people that were working to be able to roll those things back in free and open source software projects were paid. Because this is one of those things that will quite literally break the internet.
Yes.
I mean, to regular folks, that means that they can't get to their services, but it goes way, way deeper than that. I mean, we're talking about secrets stolen that were never meant to touch anywhere outside of a specific network or a specific zone. What a bullet that we all dodged with something like that. And it's not just running Ubuntu. It is pretty much all of the web servers on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. And so we were days away, really, from seeing that get released to a new LTS for Ubuntu and another release of Fedora. I mean, we were just moments in a way.
Yeah, if you weren't running systemd, if you didn't have those binaries, if you didn't have that stuff, you're running Slack or if you're running Arch, I know you weren't affected. But the fact of the matter is,
what runs the internet, Leo?
Exactly, it is not a Gentoo box hanging on by duct tape, compiling its kernel once a month. That's not what's running the internet. It is
that exists, but it's not everything. Yeah,
exactly. The bigger systems that tend to run systemd, that tend to run SSH, are the ones that are susceptible to this kind of thing.
Yeah. But it's not only that, right? Yeah. So it goes on to your next question, but go ahead.
Yeah. So to close out the closed source thing, it would have affected them and we would have never known about it. And it would have been in a Microsoft Patch Tuesday and it would have been buried under line after line after line after line after line of boring stuff. And they would have been like, oh yeah, this would have broken the internet too, but we patched that one. It's been around for 2 years and we didn't know about it, but we just figured it out. So, and that's how that would have gone. And then, ours would have ran with it. Maybe there would have been a wired deep dive into it or something like that.
Yeah, bleeping computer would have had a post. Yeah, whatever.
Right, but it would have been a blip on the internet because that kind of stuff happens in closed source software all the time. And
don't even know. Don't even know what's in it.
Don't know. So what do we do? How do you so we know that there's social engineering involved. We know that there's high technical ceiling code understanding and stuff involved. It's a multi-pronged, multi-discipline attack. What can we do to alleviate these problems from ever happening again?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have the answer to that. But hear me out. You can still have open source and still have like corporate sponsorship. I mean, Red Hat does it all the time, right? So they pay their developers to work on open source projects. They certainly have specific ones that they would like to see done, but they kind of got your own thing that you can go work on, right? And so you're getting the support you need, and hopefully you've got a team of people to work with on the stuff so that you're not getting overwhelmed and beaten down and your project gets abandoned, or you can have the coup come in and take over, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two things that we want to avoid. We want to avoid, burnout, essentially, and coups. I guess that's what we need to watch out for. And then, review of code. I don't know how else to simplify it. I think those are the things we need to have happen.
So I think maybe you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I think all of those things are correct. But I think it leads to just a totally different question. I think maybe how do we alleviate these problems in the future might be the wrong question to ask. Maybe the question we should be asking is that silly XKCD that we've seen time and time again, where it's this, like Tinker Toy building, very, very tall. And off to the side, there's this one tiny little strip of wood or whatever it's made out of. And it's
just holding up the whole thing. The whole house is sitting right on that, right?
Yeah. And in this case, it would be XZ. The question to be asking is, how safe is it to base your entire software stack on one single person's passion project?
Yeah, but I mean, everything's built on something, and it's got to start somewhere.
Right. So I think what we need to be asking ourselves before we base our entire software stack on a personal project, personal passion project, what we should be asking for is consent. We should be going, and we is in the corporate sense of we, Microsoft, Red Hat, Ubuntu, Canonical, these companies, even projects like Debian and Fedora should be, before they integrate deeply these projects into the core of their being, such that if there were some kind of infiltration by some wacky social engineer guy that was able to get binaries into a library to be able to extract SSH keys, to be able to eventually log in to your system from anywhere, is, hey man, can I use this in my project? This is a pretty big project. It's going to be big. It's like we've actually already got X number of users. Can we integrate this in there and actually use that and rely on you? And if you want money, we can provide that. If you want support, we can provide that. If you want, what do you need for us to be able to base our entire software stack on your personal passion project? Ask for consent. That's the answer I think that we're all scrambling to look for, because having that in the first place and knowing what a developer may or may not need going forward and being open to the conversation that those needs might change in the future is really the heart of the problem that we're experiencing over and over and over again. And when you have these problems, you have to get to the root of it. And the root of it is relying on somebody's work that never said you could. Yes, they licensed it that way, but you're depending on it in a way that I don't think they ever imagined when they first created that project. So on top of that open source license that says that you can do with it what you want, maybe open a line of communication to find out what it's going to take to be able to use this project in the way that you want.
Well, and I think it you need to be asking, what's the stability of the project? How many contributors are working on it? And then say, where can we come in and help?
So I think to answer the question that we started out this segment with, how do we fix the internet? It's consent. That's the fix. Communication. That's it.
Seems simple.
And easy. So if you want to get an easy list of all the links that we have available for you to click on, and some that you can't even click on, we're just going to fake you out, and you're going to click, and it's not going to take you anywhere. You can go to linuxuserspace.show. And if you want to send out messages into the ether that we may or may not read onto the show, I'm kidding. If you send me an email, I'll probably read it on the show.
We'll probably read it.
contact@linuxuserspace.show. Do you think, is this it? Do you think it's consent and communication? Because I do.
Let us know.
I think that's the beginnings of any relationship. And software development and integrating somebody's project is a relationship. Consent and communication, it is that simple. Tell me if I'm wrong. Contact@linuxuserspace.show, or go find us out on the internet, whether that's on Apple Podcasts or AntennaPod, or what was that one that you used?
Podverse,
or Audiobookshelf, or however you consume the show.
Yeah.
Leave a comment under that thing. If you can't leave a comment under that thing, go find us on YouTube, or just send us an email. linuxuserspace.show also has a contact form. Click on that. Leave us a return email so I can tell you
we'll let you
what
know.
episode and give you a timestamp of where we talk about your thing. That's actually kind of important too. I'm getting really good at that.
Yeah.
For everybody that has sent in feedback before, we probably did talk about your thing. I just did not go back and tell you where we talked about your thing. So
we make you listen to the whole show that way. I mean, I guess there's a reason for that, right?
I'm not trying to make you listen to the whole thing, but if you did, it wouldn't be a bad thing. But I'm getting really good now at sending back return emails and telling you where we actually talked about the thing that you brought up, because most of those topics are actually very interesting to me, and I love talking about those things. So
same.
Do that more. I'll send you more timestamps and stuff like that.
So that brings us down to the next time, Leo.
We're done.
And so next time, we just topics. We're going to talk about the topics and the feedback. We'll have some good stuff for you.
So
no doubt.
One thing I've been bolstered in my as we were talking about it pre-show, we brushed upon it in that first section. I want to talk about passkeys. Oh my God. Y'all,
it's hitting the scene by storm.
Get on board with these things. Throw your passwords away wherever you can. Get on board with this passkey thing.
If not, tell us why.
This is it. Yes. Tell me why I'm wrong about these passkey things, because it isn't one factor. You think it is. You're going to tell me that it is, but it's not one factor. And I'll tell you why. But you need to lay out your argument for why passkeys is not better than, I'll go out on a limb here, passkeys are better than a username, a password, and a time-based one-time password all together. Passkeys are better than those three things wrapped up into one.
That's pretty cool. So let us know.
I think so. I want everybody on passkeys. So tell me why I'm wrong, but we'll have a couple other topics for you.
We will. We totally will.
So yeah. I won't preach at you the whole time, but passkeys, I've latched onto it. It's good.
And so this blows my mind. The next history that we're going to be talking about.
Oh, yeah. You remember this?
Oh, wow. We set this one into motion. The end
Episode one.
Before that. The end of last season, we set this in motion.
Last episode 20. That's right.
Yeah, we did.
Last season finale.
And so we're coming up to the big Gen 2 history episode. That's coming. And then we'll have a brief section, I guess, about how it went for us.
Yeah, I am no longer allowed to get distracted. We've locked it in. It's Gen 2 time. We got to talk about it.
We're we're there.
Yep.
So
okay, all right.
Yeah,
I'm committed.
toss some history at us if you know it, and we'll try to verify and get it included. But that's coming.
That's actually pretty true. So if you know something that happened in Gentoo land or something like that, that may not be on the normal mailing lists or something like that, or you got to dig really far to find it, make sure to send that in. That way it can be included in the chronology of Gentoo for the season finale.
That's right.
Of Linux User Space.
So stay tuned. Tell us all the things on Reddit, Twitter, Mastodon, Telegram, Matrix, Discord, whatever. However you do it, join the conversation. All the links and show notes are on linuxuserspace.show.
Or lust.sh.
Boom.
Sometimes I forget we have that. Dan, where can I go on the internet and find all of the Ubuntu news?
Oh, well, if you want that, you can go to @Ubuntu official, either on Twitter or, Fostodon.
But their number one always retweeter is that?
Oh, well, that is going to be @KC2BEZ on either Twitter or mastodon.social.
That is right. Subscribe to Dan, or you can find me at Leo Chavez at mastodon.social. I'm a bit of a chronic retweeter.
I do that. I that's about all I really do on Twitter now is just retweet things and things.
Yeah, but at him.
Oh yeah, you could.
That'll ruffle his jimmies and get him.
That will send out the push notification, so I'll know.
That's right.
You were there.
And I'm doing my best to follow the @KC2BEZs, so that way I know when to come and swoop in and add on another layer of prodding.
Yeah, absolutely. So
add me as a maintainer so I can add my binaries to your package.
Sure, yeah. Things we can't inspect. Yeah, good idea.
Of course. So, come back in 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
For
2 weeks.
more Linux User Space. See you later.
See ya. So Podverse is one of the podcast 2.0 thingies, but I don't use any of the 2.0 stuffy. I don't use that. Other than
whatever. You're sitting on a pile of Bitcoin, aren't you, buddy? You're about to just start.
No, I don't have any sats. I don't boost a thing.
Yeah, you don't have sats. You have whole Bitcoins, man.
I don't have any of that.
You're over here like, hey, guess what? 1 Bitcoin. Have yourself $60,000, okay?
But
I don't know how much it is.
I don't know. Maybe AntennaPod does nice stuff, but one of the things I love, and I happen to really care about it because I put the effort into the show notes. The show notes look excellent, right? By the way, so this is ours.
Look at that.
This one over here.
Hey, look! It's my timestamps.
Yeah, it's your timestamps. It's the CD
look at that high
image.
qualityness too.
Yeah, no, it's nice. And so when you scroll up, you can click on those just like you hope, and you can click on all those things too. And it's takes, obviously we're squirting it out with Markdown, right?
Yeah.
And so those come out looking nice, and that's one of the things I love.